Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Disagree Better, a governor's view on how business can bridge divides. For the first half hour, we'll be talking with Governor Spencer Cox of Utah, who serves as the chair of the National Governors Association. And in the second half hour, we'll have a discussion with expert panelists from the Boston Consulting Group, the Salt Lake Chamber, and the U.S. Hispanic Business Council. I also want to give a quick thank you to our partners who helped promote this event: the Business and Democracy Initiative, Florida for Good, Leadership Now Project, Salt Lake Chamber, State Business Executives, and the U.S. Hispanic Business Council. I also want to give a big thank you to the National Governors Association for their partnership with the entire bridge building community and for inspiring and encouraging us to help engage the business community in this initiative. Business for America is a business membership organization, and it just really couldn't be a better fit for us to work together on this effort. At Business America, we've been exploring business solutions to political polarization for years now, and we are so excited to give our business members and partners across the country a bit of inspiration and hope that Americans can overcome our differences and that business can play a key role in making that happen. And we intend to provide you with actionable insights and best practices that you can apply, along with an invitation to join us in this journey. By the end of this webinar, we want you to have answers to the following questions. Why do businesses care about polarization and hyperpartisanship? What can businesses do to encourage public officials to disagree better? And what can businesses do to bridge partisan divides in our workplaces and communities? Starting off at the top here, why do businesses care? Well, first of all, political dysfunction is bad for business and the economy. Hyperpartisanship and political dysfunction are blocking progress on so many issues. So whether you're a profit-driven company or a purpose-driven company, a shareholder capitalist or a stakeholder capitalist, we need the government to function, to solve problems, to have national security, and to have a thriving economy. And that's why year after year, the Harvard Business School's report on competitiveness has identified political dysfunction as the #1 obstacle to economic competitiveness. And on January 1st of this year, the Wall Street Journal put out an article citing a Gartner report that U.S. business leaders are ranking political polarization as their second most important emerging risk after generative AI. Number 2, toxic polarization is having a substantial negative effect on the workplace, and that affects team morale and worker productivity, and that affects the bottom line. You may have even noticed this trend in business headlines across the country. And a 2021 Harvard Business Review survey found that conflict is an inescapable part of work life for employees at all levels, with 89% of US employees reporting conflict at work, and they spend about 3.5 hours a week on average dealing with it. In a more recent study conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management, 95% of US employees have been involved in polarizing workplace discussions, and 41%, this number shocked me, say they have quit jobs because their values were stigmatized by colleagues. With numbers like these, political polarization in the workplace is something that business leaders cannot ignore. And finally, number 3, hyperpartisanship is bad for America. On top of the political dysfunction and workplace conflict, let's not forget that businesses are made up of people. And at Business for America, we talk all the time with civic-minded business leaders who recognize the risks of polarization and are deeply concerned. If Americans cannot figure out how to work together despite our differences, it puts the future of our entire nation at risk. So what can businesses do? At a very high level, I'm going to take you through 5 things, but you're about to hear about it for the next 55 minutes. So here are those 5 ways we see businesses embracing bridge building and helping to mend America's social fabric. There's employee engagement, creating a bridge building culture inside your company. Community engagement, supporting bridge building initiatives in the communities where you operate. Marketing and storytelling, elevating bridge building narratives and advertising PR products and services. Your money and resources, directing political advertising and charitable giving towards social cohesion, away from polarization and conflict entrepreneurs. And finally, government relations, supporting bipartisan dialogue and legislation that foster social cohesion. So we're building an online resource hub to help your company become a business that builds bridges. We want to help you find the right set of actions for your company's brand and values. So please visit the Disagree Better at Work website. Right now, you can sign up for updates and we'll let you know when it's ready to launch, or contact us at info@bfa.us. We do hope that you will join us. And with that, I am so excited to start our conversation with Governor Spencer Cox of Utah. Governor, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be with you. I noticed my screen says Tiffany Wall. That's my assistant. I am indeed Governor Cox. And I honestly, I can't thank you enough for having me. I love everything you just said. I want to bottle up and share with every CEO and every board member in the country right now.
Well, I wish we could do that. So when we're going to do our best to get the word out here. So some folks are joining us today that haven't yet heard your story, Governor. So I would love it if you would share with us your inspiration for the Disagree Better campaign.
Sure. Well, when a person becomes the chair of the National Governors Association, we get this amazing opportunity to work on an initiative for a year. The other governors support you and try to help accomplish whatever that is. And so I sat down with my team, and I had a list of things that I was interested in, that I think problems that our country is facing, things that we needed to work on together. I was looking at the price of healthcare, inflation, the energy concerns that we have, critical minerals, all of these different things as I was dreaming about how we could problem solve together. And then I just came to this stark realization that was overwhelming every idea that we came up with, and that is that we can't solve any of our nation's biggest problems if we all hate each other. We're seeing the dysfunction in Congress. We're seeing it more often in state legislatures now. This deep polarization, this toxic polarization, is not healthy. And I was looking at the data and the research, some of the same things that you just mentioned, and it's very clear that we're headed in a very dark direction. And so we came up with this idea: could we focus on disagreement and on disagreeing better, not just another civility initiative, although we need more civility for sure. This isn't just let's be nice to each other. It is about disagreement. It's about profound disagreement. How do we disagree and stay true to our values without the hate and contempt that is being foisted on us by the conflict entrepreneurs that you mentioned? And so we just kind of fell in love with this idea. It was influenced by experts and researchers from across the country. We wanted real data and science behind what we're trying to do. And then I thought, oh man, my fellow governors will not go for this. And so we pitched it to them, and to their credit, I was stunned at how many of them said, you know what, this is exactly what we need. We agree. We used to understand how to disagree without hate and contempt, and we'd like to get back there again.
Well, and the fact that you started this really with your campaign for governor and inviting your opponent in the general election to join you in modeling how to disagree better.
Yeah, so Sarah, this has always been part of who I am and what I care about. I started getting concerned when I became lieutenant governor of Utah. I'd been a mayor and a county commissioner and a legislator, but when I became lieutenant governor in 2013, I really started to see more of this building. Of course, I look back fondly now on 2013, but in 2016 it got even more hyper polarized. So when my wife and I we really didn't want to run for governor, but my previous governor convinced us to do it. We decided we were going to try something different. We were going to kind of run as an experiment. We made a promise that we wouldn't run any negative ads, that we would only speak positively. We decided to do service projects all across the country, which is again a well-researched depolarization effort. We know that serving is a good way to cross those political boundaries and learn to care about each other again. And we had this crazy idea as we got closer to the election in November. So I run on the same cycle as the president, and so this was 2020. This was Trump Biden as they were battling for the presidency. A friend, we were lamenting the state of our country. We had just kind of finished a summer of destructive protests by the extreme left, and then we had an extreme right that was already undermining an election that hadn't even happened yet. And this was October, late September, early October. And my friend said, "Isn't there something you can do?" And I don't know, what can I do? I'm running for governor of Utah, And so that question kind of haunted me. So I called my opponent, a Democrat at the time, and a guy I respected, Chris Peterson. I said, "Chris, I have this crazy idea. What if we filmed an ad together, a campaign ad together, in which we said, I think you should vote for me, and I think you should vote for me, but we disagree on lots of things, but we respect each other, and we agree that we'll accept the results of this election, whatever they are, and we both love our state and our country. And at first he was very confused, like what, and then but by the end of the phone call he said, yeah, I'm in. And so a week later we filmed the ad together, and got it out, and within 2 weeks it was out and it went viral. We had millions of hits. I pulled it up just on Twitter the other day, just on my Twitter feed. It had like 6 million impressions, and there were lots of different, we had media requests from all over the country and all over the world. Actually, we did the BBC in Europe and together, and what it showed me is that there really is an exhausted majority out there that is hungry for something different. There's a market failure happening with both political parties right now. The first political party to figure this out, I think, is going to do very well, but neither of them seem interested in it yet. But hopefully, with what you're doing and so many other bridge builders, we'll find that we'll swing that pendulum back to where it needs to be.
Well, I hope so. Would love to hear more about Disagree Better, the campaign itself, and how have the other governors been getting involved, and what is the response from the public been like?
Yeah. So as we were looking at doing this, we thought, okay, so it's a great idea, but what do we actually do? And this a year after we filmed that ad, a professor here submitted it to the Stanford Depolarization and Social Change Lab as part of this huge depolarization experiment. And it was one of 25 interventions that they tested on over 30,000 people. And what they found was that our ad, it wasn't just like a feel-good thing. It actually had a measurable depolarization effect, including a reduction in urges towards violence, which kind of surprised us, and which was a really good thing. So we thought that we would kind of start with that as a basis. So I asked my fellow governors if they would be willing to do ads like ours. And they, to their credit, they did. So Governor Polis, my vice chair, who's a Democrat, is a bipartisan organization. We did the first ad, and it was about disagreeing better around the dinner table. That we can, as you get ready for Thanksgiving or just family get-togethers, that we use the term your MAGA uncle or your woke niece could actually have a conversation without hating each other. And people loved that ad. We've now had 20 governors participate in some way. Most of them have filmed a similar ad with someone from the other side of the aisle, a public servant from the other side of the aisle in their state. We've been having these convenings across the country with bridge building organizations that have come together. One of the best things we did at our winter meeting in DC, we were so fortunate. We had 2 Supreme Court justices, a conservative and a liberal, Justice Barrett and Justice Sotomayor, on stage together, something they don't do very often, speaking specifically about this, how that institution works through. We hear about how divided the court is, and their story was very different than I think what you would hear from the news. And I would encourage people to Google that. You can watch it. It's really incredible and something to share. But these convenings with experts, what we're trying to do is to lift up the groups who are already doing this work. Many of them have been toiling in obscurity. We're trying to shine a light on them and help people know, and elected leaders know, that there are very good people out there doing this work. And we hope to be able to help them.
That's great. I love it. Well, I think that it's worth digging into a little bit of the challenges that you're facing. Disagree Better is all about listening to the other side, of course, but everyone on this call has seen different behavior from a lot of politicians. What we see in our politics and the news and social media is often a very different story, right? So I worry that some people may be too cynical and jaded to believe that disagreeing better can actually make a difference. So what are you doing, and what can we do to overcome the resistance?
Yeah, so there's, we're trying to look at this in different categories. I've already mentioned the politicians piece of this. We need politicians who are willing to speak this language and to try to treat their opponents with dignity and respect. And so we're trying to recruit them. I'm trying to convince them that this isn't just good for the country, but it's actually good politics, that you can get elected doing this. We're focusing on families. We believe that that's very important. I already mentioned one ad that we did, but helping kids at a young age understand how to disagree. This really is just conflict resolution. We've been working with higher ed significantly. As you in the news just this week, we're seeing that higher ed used to be the best place for this. When I went to college, this is where we debated and argued, and then we went out and had dinner together. And so we're trying to help there. But this is, for purposes of this call, the last area that we really want to focus on is employment and our CEOs, the culture of work and what's happening there. I get pushback, and you will too. The pushback comes in two forms. The first form is, and mostly I hear this from the right, although it's mixed, but usually from the right I hear, oh, you just want us to go along to get along. You just want us to agree with everyone. You don't want us to stand by our principles. And so I have to push back on that. That's not what we're talking about. You should have values and principles that you believe in and that you believe passionately in. Usually from the left, what I hear is, well, I'm not going to engage with those people. Like, those people don't, they don't think I should exist, or they preach hatred, or whatever it is. Now, I'm not asking anybody to go into a situation that is dangerous, but far too often in modern society, we've associated discomfort for danger, and that's not the case. And so what you find is it really is the only way to learn from each other and to change hearts and minds eventually. It's so much harder to hate up close. And so when we have these opportunities to spend more time, I have lots of tips that I give to people. One of them is be curious, and two is to spend time with people who are different than you. And what you always find out is they're not that much different than you. We may, again, have some different political beliefs, but generally we want the same things. We love our families. We care about our country. We want to make it a better place. We just go about it a different way. And so while I encourage people to spend more time together, I also encourage CEOs to spend less time on politics. I encourage our businesses. I've seen this turn from healthy to very unhealthy as we start introducing more and more affinity groups, and we start dividing ourselves up, and our Slack channels get so divided, and we expect our business leaders to weigh in on every single issue, whatever the Supreme Court ruled this week, or whatever's happening in Israel or Hamas, and the more we find the appropriate times and places to engage in political discourse. What we need more of today is finding shared identities, the identities that used to define us. When I was younger, I didn't know the politics of my neighbors or the people in my congregation, because we rarely talked about it. Our political identities were way down the list. I was I'm a dad. I'm a Utahn. I'm a Utah Jazz fan. I'm all of these things, and eventually I'm a Republican. But that now we tend to lift that up, and the workplace is one of the areas where we're doing that more and more, where I think being colleagues and finding other shared identities could really help us to lower that tension.
Absolutely. Well, we love this idea that people bring their best selves to the workplace most of the time. And it is one of the few places where we do still interact with people who are different from us, but with shared purpose. And it really is an opportunity to lift up these same themes around how we can understand one another's viewpoints and respect the human, even when we disagree about things that are really important, whether that's work or what's happening in our society or politics. So could not agree with you more on that. I do think it's worth talking about leadership in businesses and what they can do outside the workplace. I very much agree. Weighing in on every single issue at a certain point is no longer productive and can even alienate a lot of your employees. But many of the companies we work with have concerned C-suite leaders, and they have staff in public affairs, government relations, and social impact. We've got a number of them on the call today. So what can businesses do to help encourage our public officials to disagree better?
Yeah, look, this is where I think business can have the most impact. And again, as just all of us as members of society, we need to start demanding this of our elected leaders. We tend to ask them about issues. My goal is this is the issue above all the other issues, and I want to literally make it an issue. So when you're talking to your elected leaders and you're asking them what their viewpoint is on taxes or regulation or whatever it is, ask them, What are they doing to help depolarize our country? What are they doing to treat people who are different than them with respect and dignity? Make them answer the question. Let them know that that's important to you. The other thing I would recommend, and this is where I think that our business leaders really can change the culture of our country, and that is in advertising. Now, again, I'm just saying you want to stay out of politics generally, right? As Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy shoes too, right? Whatever that is. So we don't need more divisiveness, but what we can do is we can use advertising as a way to reach this exhausted majority and as a way to bring people together. I mentioned that that depolarization study that Stanford did. Their most effective ad actually wasn't ours. Ours was close, but there was an ad that was more effective, and it was Heineken. And you can Google this. We can maybe post it in the chat. But Heineken did this incredible ad where they had people come in together. Two strangers come in, and they had to build, I think, a bar together. And so it was like an IKEA project. So they build this bar together. And then the producers come in afterwards and said, okay, you've done this now. We want to show you something. And we're going to show you an interview we did with each of you before. And they came from polar opposite sides. People who would hate each other normally in this hyperpolarized society. So they showed the interview with the one person, they showed the interview with the other person. They said, now you have an option. You can walk out of this room, or you can have a Heineken together. And they chose to have a Heineken together. I mean, this ad will make you tear up. It was emotional, it was powerful, and it showed that people who would have hated each other had this bonding experience of building this thing together and ended up becoming close and friends and liking each other. I do think that we could use so much more of that. There's an emotional tilt towards this. You can imagine McDonald's, a dad in a Make America Great Again hat, and a daughter in a rainbow scarf who haven't talked in some time, coming together and sharing a meal together. And bridge building is powerful and it's emotional, and most of us want to do that at our core. We just don't know how. So I would love to see more companies really leaning in and helping to sell their products in a way that bring people together.
I love it. And I wanted to pull out a thread in a couple of your remarks here, which is that there's actually data that show that these interventions work. Sometimes these soft skills and disagreeing better, being civil, it feels very mushy. But when it comes down to it, we actually can measure affective polarization, and that doing certain activities makes a difference. Also, just going to call out a comment in the Q&A here that there's a polarization research lab that investigates these things, and they're going to be releasing a powerful platform that will hold politicians accountable to adopt bridge building and collaborative behavior. It's yet another way that we can actually measure outcomes, and it will help us figure out how to leverage our voice in supporting bridge building. I think another question here I'd like to touch on quickly is about election campaigns. I know that Frank Luntz spoke. He's famous for his political messaging, and he spoke to the National Governors Association meeting. He did some research, and he's encouraging, and he believes that you can win without using negative tactics. Do you have any examples of successful election campaigns, especially in purple states, as we say, where the elections are more competitive, where they've been able to engage without the negative campaigning?
Yeah, sadly, I don't have many examples because very, very few people are doing it. But what Frank did, and this is another session that is public that you can watch on the National Governors Association website. It was fascinating. Frank did two things. One, he did a poll, and then he did one of his focus groups on this, and it was very powerful. Again, to see how deeply polarized we are and how dangerous that is, but also this kind of hunger for something different. My campaign was so unique because there just aren't many examples where people have been willing to do this. The conflict entrepreneurs, the political industrial complex, as I refer to them, they're full of cowards. They just copy whatever somebody did last time, and negative campaigning does have an effect, but again, not not enough people are trying the other side of that. But I was able to show that it can be very effective. The polling shows that it can be very effective. And what you do though subtly is it's not just being positive, but making this an actual issue in the campaign, right? It's calling out the negative ads and making kind of waking people up to it. It's like, yeah, I don't like that. I know I don't like it. I'm tired of every time I watch TV, this is all I hear. I would love something different. I'm hungry for something different. And oh, this candidate's giving me something different.
Well, we are running a little bit low on time, and I did want to ask you a final question here. As you brought up yourself, sometimes people, the objection to the Disagree Better campaign is often that while people agree with it in principle, they don't want to interact with those people, right? Whoever it is that they think is the most deplorable on the other side of some social issue or on the political spectrum. And when I saw you speak in DC, you came and spoke to a group of Bridgers and talking about how we could all work together. And you shared a really touching anecdote about the power of an activist in Utah who learned these skills and reached across a very deep divide. And could I ask you to share that story with us?
Of course, yeah, I'm happy to do it. It was powerful for me. So this is somebody on the other side of the aisle from me. His name is Troy Williams. He is an activist, an LGBTQ activist. He is the director of Equality Utah, which is kind of the premier LGBTQ activist organization in the state of Utah. Troy and I have battled on some things. We worked together on some things, and he 2 years ago he decided that he was going to buy a booth space at the Republican State Convention. All right, the last place that you would ever expect to see this organization. And again, you know, we're a red state, but this convention is the most red of the red, right? This is where kind of the most extreme delegates show up. There's about 4,000 delegates that get selected every year, and they tend to be much further right, especially on social issues. So everybody told him he was crazy. There were actually people who tried to get them thrown out, and to the credit of the organizers, they said nope. They met all the qualifications. They paid for their booth space. They get to be here. And so he spent time working with his team, training them on how to engage with people who are very, very angry with you, very polarized. And he did some things that I'd heard before. He did one thing that was new to me. So what they would do is they were just very open and say, hey, please tell me more about why you feel that way. That's a magical phrase, something I use all the time whenever I'm in a kind of a hostile situation. It has a tendency to really de-escalate. It gives the other person a chance to be heard. Really powerful. So they would do this. They would engage respectfully. Then he would ask, now can I share with you why I feel the way I do? And after listening to them, they're much more likely to hear back. But then they did something that was unique to me. He said that we would always say, I'm going to give you the last word, anything you think I should know, which is incredibly deferential. Well, I can tell you it was a wild experience for all of them. But the stories he shared, honestly, I believed in this stuff, but I wasn't sure it could work in this situation. But he told me one story in particular about a man who came and was so angry, just yelling at them, screaming at them. And Troy, to his credit, went up to him again, treated him very respectfully, listened to him, shared his thoughts in a kind way, and then said, I'm going to give you the last word. And the guy just looked at him and then gave him a hug and apologized. And now, look, I'm pretty sure that guy didn't go out and buy a pride flag. He didn't vote for Joe Biden, but in that moment, right, they saw each other as human beings. And I do believe that person will forever treat people who are different than him with a little more respect than he did before that engagement. Now, again, Troy didn't have to do that. He didn't have to go there. He didn't have to be in that space, but he did. And he made a difference. And I think all of us were better because of that. So it helped inspire me to try harder and to be better. I don't always get it right. I make mistakes all of the time. The incentive structure of our politics is the complete opposite of all of this. We get rewarded with more hits and clicks and more time on cable news if I'm loud and obnoxious and treat other people with disrespect. But I think our country desperately needs this, and I'm grateful, Sarah. There are people like you and others who are doing the real work of bridge building.
Great. And Governor, any final thoughts or remarks for our friends in the business world before you go?
All I can say is this is, folks, look, however important you think this is, I promise it's more important. I truly believe that the future of our country, and not just our country. I had the ambassador from Switzerland who pleaded with us as governors in a very powerful speech that we were not expecting, saying that this depolarization in the United States of America is destabilizing the entire world. And they need a strong America because there is no one else that can fill that void. And people like Vladimir Putin and countries like Iran and China are emboldened because we're so busy fighting about things that often don't matter. And so I'm just desperate for more of you to join this small but burgeoning, growing group of bridge builders. We need your help. So please stand with us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that call to action. And it's been wonderful talking to you today. And I understand you have to run. So thank you again. We hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sarah.
For the second half of the talk here, we are going to talk to our business leaders, our experts in the business community. And I'm going to hand the mic off to Richard Island.
Good. Thank you, Bonk. Good. Well, welcome everyone. And now we want to hear from some of our business colleagues. And we have three contributors to this conversation. And I'll just quickly introduce them. Julia Dar from the Boston Consulting Group, Ginger Chin from the Salt Lake Chamber, and Javier Palomares from the U.S. Hispanic Business Council. And they've each been thinking a lot about the impact of polarization and conflict in the workplace and have some interesting perspectives that we wanted to share with you. So, Julia, let me start with you. And in your capacity at the Boston Consulting Group, I know you've been thinking a lot about workplace productivity and the challenges that polarization is posing to productivity and teamwork. And that at BCG, you have a behavioral science lab. So give us a sense, if you would, about, first of all, what the lab does, and then what you're finding about the negative impacts of polarization and conflict in the workplace.
Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're all joining us from. It's really a pleasure to be here to talk about such an important conversation in our workplaces, like around our executive tables, and of course, in our national conversation as well. And so indeed, the BCG's Behavioral Science Lab, which I lead, is a research lab, but for our mind, much more importantly, it's a doing lab. We try to take insights from our own research, the research of others, and implement that with teams, individuals, leaders who are in a position to change the direction of their sector, company, team. And we observe a couple of things, and the governor and Sarah framed some of them very effectively at the beginning of this conversation, which is that to generalize, people at all levels of an organization find it more and more challenging to be able to disagree effectively. And that people experience a lot of anxiety about disagreement in the workplace, that is almost biochemical for people, that you can see physiologically people freeze up as you start to talk about even the possibility of conflict and productive dialogue in the workplace. So there's a lot to overcome there. There's really good news too, which is it is quite clear that there are things that leaders can do really well to increase the probability of successful and productive conflict in workplaces. One is anchoring back in values. So reminding people that when you come to work, very often people have a shared sense of mission, purpose. You don't always share the reason. Richard and I might have very different reasons why we have taken a job, but there is at least some common ground that brings us together. And one of the things that I often talk about is this importance of establishing what social psychologists call shared reality. You're somewhat fortunate in the workplace. There is a shared reality to begin with. Second, leaders can proactively shape that reality by defining the values of an organization and continuing to ground decisions in those. A really good example is Michelin, the tire company, which of course is a French company, but with really significant production facilities here in the United States. And one of the core values of Michelin is respect for facts. And imagine that as a company value. You talk about the idea that respect for facts is a way in which we also treat one another with respect. And then the third thing that really appears to make a difference and be helpful is to acknowledge and repeat that successful, productive disagreement in an organization is not just a choice, it's also a skill, and that we are obliged to, and it's frankly a very good investment, to teach people the art and science of productive disagreement and the ways in which leaders have expectations for how disagreement should unfold in the workplace. Mm. The workplace is one of very few places where Americans and people who are not Americans, but who, like myself, find themselves working in America, come into contact with other individuals who are politically, ideologically not like them.
Right. And
that means that there's a responsibility among business leaders to think about how that gets negotiated. But even more importantly, and I hope this becomes the discussion, there's an opportunity to think about how that becomes a source of advantage, how difference, diversity, disagreement is not a problem to be solved, but it's a source of potential to be unlocked.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You know, what we've heard a lot of is from managers who work for publicly traded companies in particular, and I know we're going to hear from Javier about small businesses, but when you think about large companies, many managers did not sign up to negotiate and navigate conflict over social and cultural issues, right? So can you give us an example of a successful training program or approach that a company or industry is applying that helps prepare leaders to be more effective in negotiating conflict?
Yes, of course. And let me talk about some of the work that we're doing with some of our clients at the moment. And so, my gosh, like, I have a lot of empathy for frontline managers at the moment. Like, it's a tough gig at
Right.
the best of times. I think it's a very tough gig right now. And managers, especially early career or first time people leaders, very often say to me, not only did I not sign up for it, I'm not equipped. I don't feel skilled or confident to be able to do this effectively. And so we are just going to do nothing. That's an understandable, but not very helpful solution. So the place that we start, and I've seen a lot of effectiveness, both with senior leadership teams, but also people earlier in their careers, is to say, let's bring it all the way back for a second to the individual. So stop talking about the issue for the moment. Let us first get some convergence and common ground on the idea that this team being more effective at disagreeing, using our conversations to do that really well, would be a valuable thing to do. That is generally a reasonably easy thing for people to agree to. Then we assess psychographically. We have a really simple instrument, individuals' disagreement style. And that's not a fixed thing, but this is, your style of disagreement now. And so then people have a little bit more self-insight, a little bit more insight about the other human beings who make up their team or workplace. And that's helpful. And that does seem to go some way in building empathy and understanding. However, the next step which is where this becomes disproportionately more effective, where the results become disproportionately more sustainable, is when you practice with an actual disagreement, right? So when you actually allow people to say there is something that I have been waiting to talk about, and I've wondered why no one has ever asked about it so far, but I'm like desperate to talk about it. This is what we call pluralistic ignorance, the idea that there must be some reason why no one has ever brought this up that I just don't know about. Giving people a space to have at least one of those conversations, practice having one of those conversations, starts to build confidence in the manager that it's not only on them, that it's on individuals to do that really effectively. And it is on the broader ecosystem of the organization to do that well. I think the final thing that seems to work sort of by osmosis through the organization is when senior leadership teams can role model the same. Many of our listeners are probably on a senior leadership team where you have a meeting, there's about 3 minutes to go. The most senior person in the meeting looks around and says, "Are we all aligned?" And there is only one correct answer to that question, obviously, right? That's not an appropriate moment to say, like Ginger settled, like, no, I'm not aligned. Right. That's clearly not an acceptable response. And so getting leaders to say, we're not seeking alignment in the organization. We actually think that can be quite dangerous because it forces people to nod when they wanted to shake their head. And so we value agreement. Like, what we are seeking is agreement. If we don't get it, that's okay. But we're not going to pretend that we have agreement by asking if we have alignment. Okay. And that might sound like a really narrow distinction.
No, it's important one.
Two different words that start with A, but that precision seems to really help people.
Right. Okay. I think that's a really important distinction. Ginger, let me move to you. And, as the public policy director for the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, you represent a wide cross-section of businesses throughout the state. And I know that Utah is rapidly growing and attracting a lot of new skilled people who want to work in the state because of the quality of life. And I imagine that also has maybe brought some different social and cultural values into the workplace. So when you hear your governor talk about the Disagree Better campaign, and I know the chamber has helped to promote the idea of civility, tell us a bit about how the business community in Utah is applying some of these insights, and what evidence you're seeing that there's some receptivity within the private sector to find more effective ways to disagree.
Yeah, Richard, thank you. And just before I start out, I just want to say how proud we are of our governor to take this on as an initiative. And it's so timely too. And we're just fortunate to see this kind of leadership from our executive branch to our business community and our community at large. And he brings that same passion to so many initiatives. And so to have him lead out with Disagree Better just makes us really proud here as Utahns, for sure. For us, conflict obviously is not new. We've already addressed that. This is something that's been happening for a long time, for history, years and years and years, hundreds of years. But our business community, what we found is this complete exhaustion over this disagreement, this incivility, and this desire to do what's right and assume positive intent. And so, we're to kind of piggyback a little bit on, what we're doing to help the governor with, improve his message and I guess not improve it. He's got a great message, but to promote his message. A couple of things. We've held a couple of events for our business community to really talk about civil disagreement. One of the things that we did was hosted an event. There were about 1,300 of our business leaders that attended the event here in downtown Salt Lake City. And we used the Dignity Index. If you are familiar with Tim Shriver and the Dignity Index, we took actual quotes from politicians, placed them on a screen, and then had at individual tables rate those quotes based on how civil they are. And then we facilitated discussions amongst the table to say, how could this be said differently? What was the real intention of the message? And then what could be said differently? So the idea here is to create the conversations and get the conversations moving and flowing amongst those who actually could disagree, but they see a common thread in the message that's being delivered with the assuming positive intent by the message. So that's one of the ways that we've worked to help promote this disagree better. Also, we've had several opportunities to have groups speak. So, Richard, you referenced how Utah's changing and our demographic is shifting. We right now are a blue city, so we're a Democrat city. Our capital city is very Democrat, very blue, but our state in large is a red state. And so we have a lot of conservatives across the entire state. They don't always agree with what's happening across the state and the direction that needs to happen for our growth and our change. So we hosted an event where we had our then Speaker of the House, who's a very conservative Republican with some solid business values, and our mayor of our capital city, Mayor Mendenhall, who's a Democrat. And we allowed them to speak about times when they completely disagreed, but how they came to a common ground and how they maintained their friendship through it all as an example of this disagree better. And they teased each other, they joked, and we just feel like there's an opportunity for us to show and have open dialogue.
That's fascinating. And it's encouraging to hear that you're trying to spread the word. And I wonder just quickly if you could tell us, are you partnering with chambers in more rural communities, more conservative communities across the state?
Yeah, so we are part of an organization called the Utah Association of Chambers. We're the largest chamber. We're statewide chamber. But we invite them to all of these meetings. We allow them to come and listen to some of the examples that are happening here. And we work on political topics together. So throughout the legislative session, which Utah is a very short legislative session, we bring in these other chambers to talk about challenges that are happening across our state. So that's another way that we work together.
Okay, good. I want to try to get back to that, but want to get Javier in this conversation. And Javier, I think it would be fair to say that you are representing probably one of the fastest growing demographics in the country. Hispanic small businesses in particular, I would imagine, are mushrooming in the past 5-10 years across the country, and I'm sure have been experiencing conflict and polarization in their workplaces. So, we often think of this conflict as being addressed by large companies, but I know that's not true. So could you give us a sense of the work that the U.S. Hispanic Business Council is doing to address conflict and divisiveness in the workplace among your constituents?
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard. You're absolutely right. First of all, Hispanics are starting new ventures at a rate of 3 to 1 when compared to the general market. Hispanic, we represent and advocate on behalf of 4.5 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $850 billion to the American economy. As for the challenges that we're seeing, the short answer is yes. The challenges are the same, but they're much more acute in the typical American small business. The workforce of an average American small business is really a microcosm of the American public and the workforce in a very large corporation. It's made up of the same kinds of, Americans who believe that they too have, rights and freedoms to include, freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom to bear arms, to name a few. So while the issues are the same, the small businesses' capacity really to manage the situation is quite different and much more difficult, because the average small business does not have access to a large department of HR professionals, by way of example, or a division of legal experts, nor does it have the resources to hire, outside counselors or external consultants. So oftentimes it's the business owner herself who has to deal with the situation, and from both a personal and frankly a legal perspective, that can be much more challenging for the small business owner. And you know, this matters because in this country, it's the small businesses that create 2/3 of all the new jobs. So as the American small business community goes, so goes our economy and the commercial interests of our nation.
Mhm. We had chatted, I think, last week about one of the drivers of this divisiveness among small businesses, which, you know, some cite as racial discrimination or immigration. So how important is that issue within the, you know, the customers, the companies you're working with, as a reason for conflict in the workplace?
Well, yeah, I mean, the factors that are driving conflict in the average American small business, again, are the same as the ones that are being you know, dealt with in the large corporations. Things like racial tensions, fair treatment of the LGBTQ community, wage disparities, and certainly immigration. Our own proprietary polling of hundreds of small businesses found that the two top concerns amongst our constituency were, number one, the economy, and number two, immigration.
Mhm.
Coincidentally, exit polls of all of the early voting states, whether that was New Hampshire or Iowa or California or here Texas, to name just a few, the top two concerns of the average American voter: the economy and immigration. And so again, it's a microcosm of the broader American community. So I'll take immigration specifically as an example. In the small business community, and certainly in the Hispanic small business community, it is not unusual at all that the owner himself might be an immigrant. And so imagine a world where you might have employees that feel very differently about immigrants and immigration in general than you yourself do. And so I think while the issue may be the same, it is managed quite differently. And very oftentimes, again, because of the construct of the business, it makes it a bit trickier. By the way, in my opinion, the way that Utah has managed this topic of immigration and immigrants in general, I think is exemplary. I think it's a template for how the rest of the nation, and any business for that matter, should really kind of harness the power and the potential of the immigrant community. I encourage small business owners, when I talk to them, to look up the Utah Compact, because it's a very simple set of principles for how you treat, you know, the stranger, the visitor, the immigrant, and how you harness the potential of that individual for the greater good.
Right, right. Thank you for that, Javier. I want to ask you each to just briefly comment on a suggestion the governor made, which was about the value of service projects, I think is how he framed it. And as an opportunity to you know, collaborate as employees, but do something in the community within which the company operates. So Ginger, are there examples within the Salt Lake business community where conflict has been diffused by getting employees to work on a project outside of the workplace?
Absolutely. And one thing, and you know, I appreciate Javier referencing the immigration and the compact, the racial compact. Thank you for referencing that. That's a little side note. But one thing about Utah that makes us really unique and a little bit special is that service is embedded in our culture. It's just part of who we are. And so there's service projects all over the place. And I'm not surprised the governor put that into his you know, his core mission of being and leading our state. So absolutely, whether you join an organization such as United Way and come together on issues like that, or smaller or service projects, I can't think of one example, but I can think of thousands. This is just something that's embedded in the Utah culture, Richard.
Okay, great. Julia, are there examples that you are aware of that you think are exemplary?
I am getting more and more optimistic that we are starting to see collaborations between competitors on issues that are important. So immigration is a really good example. I think another example that you are starting to see more and more of at the state and local level, and I hope that we see more and more of, is investing in skilling, training, community college, and vocational education, where, of course, like, an individual employer benefits profoundly from a partnership with a technical and vocational training institution. But the community, the city, the state, the hundreds of small businesses and medium-sized enterprises that are suppliers to customers of those larger companies also benefit very profoundly. And so looking for those opportunities for both common grounds, but also in the business context, mutual advantage. And I think the idea of having often very fierce competitors in very fiercely competitive industries say, there are places where we are stronger together. There are plenty of things we disagree on. I think my product is far superior to your product, but it doesn't mean that we cannot get things done together. It doesn't mean that we cannot work productively together. I hope that you see more and more of those across state and local races and the discussions over the course of the summer and into November.
Great, good. And Javier, let me just give you 30 seconds to offer maybe an example or two within the small business community, which is obviously the closest to the street, to the public. So what evidence do you see of small businesses that are, being out in the community trying to address these issues?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. In the small business community, it's very prevalent. Everything from sponsoring the local, little league team to, the community playground. The difference is that in the small business community, the business owner, she drops off her kids with everybody else and picks up the kids from school along with every other mom or dad that's in that community. She sees her clients on a daily basis. She goes to the grocery store like they do. She pumps her own gas like they do. So unlike a huge corporate, CEO that's somewhat removed from the local community, right, the small business owner really depends on that local community for his or her bottom line. And so this involvement is very, very prevalent in the American small business community.
Good, good. Well, thank each of you very much, Julia, Ginger, and Javier. Really appreciate your insights today. And let me turn it back over to Bonk to close us out here.
Great. Well, thank you, Richard. Thanks again to the panelists. Thanks again also to Governor Cox and the National Governors Association for their leadership and helping to make this happen. Just a quick reminder before everyone goes, please do visit the Disagree Better at Work website and sign up for updates, DBAW, disagreebetteratwork.us. Or if you really want to get involved, contact us directly, info@bfa.us. Today is just the beginning. We're really excited to work with each of you to help make this vision a reality. Have a great day, everyone.